L.R. Millican's days in Lampasas, Texas, were marked by fortune and fame, etched into the rugged landscape of the frontier. Back then, Lampasas teetered on the edge of untamed Texas territory, where the ground often soaked up the blood of those caught in the chaos. Dust storms and cattle herds weren't the only things charging westward. Trouble was, too. Saloon doors swung open to rowdy cowboys and outlaws, and gunfights became a grim routine. Winchesters and six-shooters drew fast, taking aim at anyone in their sights, innocent, guilty, or plain unlucky. When the smoke cleared, the victims lay where they fell. Born in Millican, Texas on August 27, 1853, Leander Randon L.R. Milican grew up in the thick of it. As a young man in Lampasas, he quickly gained a name for himself as even-tempered, reliable, and utterly fearless. In September 1872, at just 19, he became the youngest deputy sheriff in town. Folks took notice of his remarkable way with troublemakers. As family friend Buren Sparks once put it, he had a strange hold on bad men. They seemed to shrink back under the steel of his steady gray eyes. There wasn't a soul in flesh he feared. The twists of fate shaped L.R. Millican's life. Back in 1867, during the deadly yellow fever epidemic that ravaged East Texas, his family fled their hometown of Millican, a settlement founded by their kin, seeking refuge in Lampasas. Tragedy followed them on the journey. J.W. Weaver, Millican's stepfather, passed away on the trail and was buried along the way. Shortly after arriving in Lampasas, Millican's mother, Marcella, also succumbed to the illness on December 16th. With their parents gone, young L.R., just 14 years old, and his brothers, Marcellus and Wilbur, were taken in by their Aunt Amanda Nichols and her husband, Lorenzo D. Nichols, who helped raise the boys. As a teenager, Millican found work wherever he could. He first took up the dangerous job of outpost express rider, delivering mail on the treacherous route between Lampasas and Austin, always keeping a wary eye out for Comanches. Later, he worked as a young cowboy on John Sparks's ranch in Lampasas County, learning the ropes of frontier life. Meanwhile, William Lewis Lou Schroyer was carving his own path in Lampasas County. In 1870, at 26, he was listed as a stock raiser in the U.S. federal census, living with his wife Mary. By 1873, the couple had 2 sons, but by 1876, Schroyer's name was no longer tied to ranching. Instead, he'd become a wanted outlaw. At some point, the paths of the law-abiding Millican and the wayward Schroyer crossed in the rugged town of Lampasas. When December 1871 rolled into Lampasas County, the folks geared up to celebrate the holiday season in true frontier style. But that Christmas turned into one for the history books. Festivities kicked off on Christmas Eve with whiskey flowing freely, six-shooters and Winchesters blazing in the streets, and kids lighting firecrackers to add to the ruckus. The noise carried on through the night and stretched into the next 2 days, as reported later by the Lampasas Leader in their December 30, 1898 edition. The Weaver Saloon, owned by Tillman Till Weaver, L.R. Millican's step-uncle, was at the heart of the commotion. The saloon's walls were peppered with bullet holes from the revelry, but, as the Leader noted, it was a miracle no one got hurt. Upstairs in a 2-story stone building, a more civil Christmas Eve gathering took place, and L.R. Millican was there to keep things from getting out of hand. He escorted his cousin Albina Nichols and Vic Bradford, a boarder at the Nichols home, to the event. The evening unfolded with music, lively conversation, the soft glow of candlelight, and neatly wrapped gifts adding to the holiday cheer. Millican's steady presence helped ensure that the Yuletide merriment stayed just that, merry. Ben Horrell, likely a good-natured young fellow when sober, had a knack for letting whiskey stir up some peculiar notions in his head. That Christmas Eve, he seemed mighty entertained by the idea of turning the holiday into a bit of a shooting match. As the Christmas chairman started handing out gifts, Horrell, itching for some target practice, hollered, "Toss them candles out the window." His plan, to take aim and shoot the flames clean out. The Horrell brothers, known for their wild streak, were fighters through and through. Once respected members of the Lampasas community, life's hard knocks and a few questionable choices eventually nudged some of them down a darker trail. Survival on the frontier wasn't always clean or lawful, and the Horrells became infamous in the years that followed. Millican acted fast, snuffing out a pair of candles before quietly guiding Nichols and Bradford toward the stairs. He urged them and others to make their way out without stirring up more trouble. Meanwhile, Ben Horrell, still riled up, hollered more commands. Thinking quick, Millican appealed to Horrell's sense of frontier manners, asking for his help to keep the younger men back so the older men, women, and children could head down the narrow stairway first. Eager to lend a hand, Horrell leapt over benches, sending them clattering aside in his haste. Once the building was cleared, Horrell insisted on some target practice. Now outside, Millican tossed a candle into the air, and Horrell, with a crack shot, snuffed it out mid-flight. After one more candle met its end, the immediate danger passed and the night settled down. The Christmas revelry of 1871 rolled on, wild as ever. On Christmas Day, Lou Schroyer, full of holiday cheer and whiskey, waved a six-shooter around before riding his horse straight into a saloon. The partygoers thought it good fun to drench the horse in alcohol, according to the Lampasas leader. Meanwhile, John West added to the chaos by riding his horse into Dr. W.A. Frazier's drugstore. By Christmas night, the courthouse, standing on the north side of the business square, mysteriously went up in flames. With it, the county's earliest legal records turned to ashes. The months that followed brought big changes for young Millican. On September 9, 1872, at just 19 years old, he officially gained his freedom when Judge E.B. Turner in Lampasas issued him emancipation papers, releasing him from the legal bounds of being a minor. Not long after, Justice of the Peace Thomas Pratt appointed Millican as a deputy sheriff, a position that would test his grit and character. Before Millican's appointment, Schroyer had come to town for a friend's trial. The air was thick with tension as folks gathered, expecting things to turn ugly. Stories of that day and the heated words exchanged would make their rounds for years. Sheriff Shadrach T. Denson, seeing trouble brewing, asked the crowd for help disarming Schroyer. At first, not a soul stepped forward. Then at last, a tall, sturdy young guy responded, "I'll go." Millican was the one. He wasn't armed, but he carried something just as powerful. Carefully chosen words, a calm demeanor, and his piercing gray eyes that could steady even the most reckless soul. Denson approached Schroyer, explaining the situation. "You'll have to turn in your firearm," he stated bluntly. "Only police officers are permitted to carry in the town, and conflict is building." Schroyer, defiant as ever, replied, "Well, I don't know whether I'll give up my gun or not." Millican turned to Schroyer, his voice steady but low, pointing to the crowd gathered nearby. He explained that while no one wanted trouble, those men were ready for it if it came. "Now, you can do more good for us than anyone else in town," Millican said. "All you need to do is gather your boys, put your guns away and keep them away from the booze. Keep things peaceful. Otherwise, no one can say what might happen." Schroyer glanced between Millican and Denson, weighing his options. Finally, he relented. "All right, boys," he said. "I'll make sure my crowd doesn't stir up any trouble. We'll head over, and I'll leave my guns with old Uncle Till." True to his word, Schroyer walked into Weaver's saloon and handed his guns over, defusing the situation. But life on the Texas frontier was as unforgiving as it was unpredictable. Schroyer's story came to a violent end just a few years later. On January 10, 1876, in dry Frio Canyon, Uvalde County, he crossed paths with the notorious Texas outlaw Wild Bill Longley. Longley, a man known for his ruthlessness, shot and killed Schroyer, allegedly for a bounty that had been placed on his head. Millican's path often crossed with the infamous Horrell brothers, Ben, Mart, Merritt, Sam, and Tom. While they seemed to hold a measure of respect for him, that didn't stop one or more of them from stealing his horses on one occasion. Millican, armed with nothing more than a pistol in his pocket, set out alone to confront the brothers and reclaimed what was his. Later, Millican joined a posse tasked with tracking the Horrells and others after a deadly shootout on March 14, 1873, at Jerry Scott's saloon in Lampasas. The chaos left 4 state police officers dead, and the hunt for justice was on. Authorities managed to apprehend Mart Horrell, James Grizzell, and Alan Whitcraft, or Whitecraft, for their roles in the killings, but several others slipped away. The saga didn't end there. On May 2, 1873, the Horrells, along with a band of men, staged a daring jailbreak in Georgetown, Texas, freeing Mart and the others from custody, ensuring their legend of lawlessness would continue. A few of the Horrell brothers moved their cattle into Lincoln County, New Mexico territory, later in 1873. Once there, tensions flared over a bad land deal, disputes over cattle sales, water rights, and simmering racial conflicts. Matters came to a head on December 1, 1873, when Ben Horrell's drunken rampage in Lincoln ended with his death. This tragedy sparked the bloody Horrell Wars in Lincoln County. By the end of February 1874, the embattled Horrell family had returned to Lampasas. For Millican, 1874 marked a turning point. That August, he found faith at an old-fashioned Methodist camp meeting at Cherokee Creek in San Saba County. By December 20th, he embraced Baptist teachings and was baptized the following day. His calling to preach soon followed. He was licensed to preach in February 1875 and ordained by the First Baptist Church of Lampasas in February 1878. Just days after his ordination, Millican wed Georgia Catherine Saunders on February 12, 1878 in Blanco County. The Horrells, however, couldn't outrun trouble. Accusations of cattle rustling dogged them, and the violence that followed became infamous. On January 22, 1877, Merritt Horrell and Pink Higgins met for the first time in Lampasas' Gem Saloon. This was the beginning of the murderous Horrell-Higgins rivalry that left a trail of blood across Lampasas. Before pulling the trigger, Higgins told Horrell, "This is about settling our cow dispute." The Horrells sought out Millican, now a man of the cloth, to preside over Merritt's burial. At the family's request, he led the service, offering words of solace for the grieving kin. Afterward, Millican sat down with the remaining brothers, urging them to turn toward faith and leave their troubles behind. While they spoke of wanting to change their ways, the brothers admitted they felt their path had already been set, one leading them down a shadowed and uncertain road.